Hey, welcome Ruby friends, Ruby developers from all over the world. My name is Jesus Castillo from rubyguides.com, and today we have ourselves another live stream where we talk Ruby. So say hi in the chat if you're watching this live, say where you're from, have code with Sampurna. He says, hey Jesus, well, hi, guess your name is Sampurna, so welcome. Yeah, some kind of hashtag thing. I'm looking at the chat. So what we have ourselves here, let's talk about Ruby methods, specifically kinds of Ruby methods. So let's do kinds of Ruby methods. Okay. So let's talk about methods. What are methods? That's a basic thing, right? In Ruby, have def, for example, and this is a method. Very simple. This is one of the simple methods that you can possibly create, right? Def means define, right? Define. That's what def means. Only that you don't have to type define. We just type def. So less characters to type, but that's what it means. And what are we defining? We're defining a method with a name, right? For example, in this case, the name is the letter A. And let me make this slightly bigger for you. There. Okay. And of course, it has a number of possible names. You can even have names that start with an underscore. You might find that there are some special methods that are defined this way, although for regular methods, I don't recommend that. There are other kinds of strange methods that start with the @ symbol. We covered this in the last live stream. These are called Unary methods. So that's a kind of method. Hold on. It's not like that because I have the star. This star means I have something wrong with my syntax. So you notice in pry, normally you have like this character, right? This greater than character in your pry session. By the way, if you want to learn more about pry, that's the 5th chapter in my Ruby book, Ruby Deep Dive. If you already have the book, well, open up the 5th chapter, and thanks for your support. If you don't, well, you can find it in my website, rubyguides.com. Okay, so what does this mean? This greater than symbol basically means enter your code. Feel free to enter your code. But as soon as you enter some code, if it's incomplete, pry detects it's incomplete, meaning syntax incomplete, not logically incomplete. So there's an important difference to make. If it's syntactically incomplete, what you get is this star. So this means this star symbol, this asterisk. So this means enter your code, where I'm waiting for your code. This means, okay, continue writing your code. You haven't finished yet. So this is an important distinction because it allows you to find out when you are making a syntax error, basically. So another demonstration is you know that for a string, if I write my site name as a string, you know that all strings have an opening quote, closing quote, right? Or all arrays have opening square brackets and closing square brackets, right? They have to be balanced like this. We call this balanced parentheses or balanced quotation marks, balanced square brackets. They have to be balanced so that Ruby knows when something starts and when something ends, because Ruby or any programming language for that matter, it follows a set of rules, the syntax. So it can't read your mind. You have to tell it very exactly, very precisely when something starts and when something ends. That's why we have to do this. We have to say, okay, here is where this array starts, here's where it ends. Here's where this string starts, this is where it ends. So I see a lot of beginners get confused with this, that never done any kind of programming. Well, it's important that you follow the rules in this case, because there are hard-coded rules into pretty much every programming language. Otherwise, it couldn't function, because it can't predict, okay, that's the end or that's the start, right? Literally, these symbols are what make this something, give this the structure, the meaning, the programming language, right? That is to explain that that's why you get the asterisk in Bright. If I now do, for example, ABC, and notice that I'm not going to have the closing quotation mark, what happens? Well, I get the asterisk. Asterisk means I haven't finished my expression. So I can either finish it with another quotation mark, or, as you can see, this adds a number of new lines, which are here. And the new line character, as you might know or not know, that's, if this new information to you, that's also good to remember. So take notes of the new things you're learning, or things that you need to review, or things like that. It's good to take some notes so you can review them later or do some more research on these topics, right? So this is called the new line character. It's a special character that you don't see when it's printed, right? You don't see it because it's expressed as a new line, but you can see it here as it's a special character, so you know that there are 4 new line characters. Okay, so if instead of finishing the expression, you just want to end the expression without running the code, you can press Ctrl+C, right? So this is a very helpful sequence. Also for your notes, if you are familiar with this key sequence, there is the Control key in your keyboard, which you don't usually use very often. But if you press that key, which is in the lower left of your keyboard for a regular full standard keyboard, you press that key, you leave that key pressed, and then press the C. Use the regular C character, like in cat, right? You press that C along your control, and that will put you back into the regular mode before running the code, so you don't get the syntax error message, right? So there is that. So I just wanted to explain that, and we can go back to our methods. So if I try to define this strange kind of method, we did this the other day. That's called like the Unary method, if we can define it. I don't know, we can do that here. I think we need, the reason is that we need a thing here. Let's try that. I think it's actually like that. It's one way or the other. There we go. That's the right way. So it's very particular, this kind of method. As you see, it wouldn't allow me to define it without an argument. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. you have to define this kind of unary method with an argument. So if you aren't familiar with the special kind of method, watch the last live stream, or the one before that is one of those. Okay, so that's one kind of method. Of course, we have the regular method, just that no arguments. Have the method with one argument, and let's just call this something def learning. One argument. We have the default argument, and the difference is that, do you know the difference? Well, if you are looking at the screen and not just listening to me, which can happen, and that's okay, but the difference is that this is a default value and this is not a default value. So when I call this method, it's going to ask me for the value. It's going to get an error, but with this method I don't get an error because this becomes an optional value. So if I give it an argument 1, it works. If I don't give it an argument, it also works. But this variable, this parameter, is going to become nil or whatever. It doesn't have to be nil, right? It can be whatever you want, right? So that's default or optional, as you can see, values. There is also keyword arguments. There are other kinds of arguments. Let's look at different other kinds of methods. Okay, how about that? We can do this one. How about that? Have you seen this before? This kind of method with exclamation mark? Well, there is nothing special about this. The thing is that we give it meaning as Ruby developers, right? So you need to make this distinction, very important, to make distinctions, to understand the difference between things. And in this case, the difference that we need to understand is the difference between the meaning that we give to things as developers and the meaning that the programming language gives to things. So that's different. That's different because what's given by the programming language, if you don't follow that, you get an error, right? A syntax error usually. But if you don't follow what we have as conventions between us as developers, as Ruby developers, then you don't get an error and your program will work probably, but you're not going to understand. You're going to have the same level of understanding with other developers because you're doing something different, right? So in this case, the exclamation mark, we use this to say, okay, this method is going to be doing something different than the same method without the exclamation mark. This difference is usually that this is returning a new object, so this doesn't change anything internally for this object. It just returns a new object, and this is going to change the object. So that's usually the intended difference. And usually when you have one method with the exclamation mark, there is also the non-exclamation mark method. So some people think this like a more destruction, more changing method, and this more like more safe method. That's another way to think about it. Okay, so that's another kind of method. I've seen some people to use this incorrectly, this convention incorrectly, And that happens when you only have this method and you use this like an axiom, like you would use this in English, right? Like, do this, exclamation mark, like an imperative kind of thing. And there is no version without the exclamation mark. I think that's the wrong, interpretation of the exclamation mark convention. Okay, so that's not the right use. Should be this. Okay, so I hope that helps. Another kind of method is with question marks, like learning question mark. What's going on in here? Again, this is not enforced by the language syntax. It's allowed, but not enforced, meaning that just because you have the question mark, the method by itself doesn't do anything different, right? It's still a regular method, only that the name of the method has a question mark. Now, what does this suggest to you when it has having a question mark? What in English we do with question marks? Well, we ask questions, right? We ask questions. So when we use the question mark in a method name, we're asking a very specific question actually. We're asking, are you learning? Yes or no? We're asking a yes or no question. So what's expected from you and what's expected when you're using any kind of question mark method, like for example empty, right? If I do empty question mark, is an actual built-in Ruby method. What's expected is a yes or no answer. Okay, and let me take a quick sip of water. Because we're doing this live. Yeah, so that's the question mark method. And we expect a yes or no answer, which into programming translates into true and false, right? Yes and no translate into true and false, and as you can see here, that's our output from empty question mark. We're asking, is this object, more specifically this string, empty? Is this string empty? Yes or no? Or true or false? Is it true that it's empty or not? Or is it false? That's basically what we're doing with the question mark methods. So there are other names for these methods. We call them, for example, query methods. Because query means we are asking a question. And there was another name that I don't quite remember right now. But yeah, that's what these question mark methods are. There's nothing magic, there's nothing special about them other than what's expected of them. Just because we set this as a general idea, a general agreement between us as Ruby developers, right? That's what the question mark is. Okay, any questions? We have Scrivans Pitani. He says, hi, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Do you have any questions or anything that you would like to mention? So far we covered a few methods, few kinds of methods. We cover methods with a question mark. Remember, that's query methods where we are asking true or false questions. And we have the exclamation mark methods. We also have the regular methods with or without arguments. So regular methods with or without arguments. And we also cover the unary method. Unary methods, which are these strange looking methods like that. Okay, so that already covers a lot of what you will find in when you're reading code, Ruby code. Now there are other kinds of methods that you might find a little strange. For example, the following method. We have something like this, maybe that or this. Yes, this is indeed a valid method name. Where do you see this a lot? Well, what if I do this? I do an array with random numbers, and here's a quick trick to random numbers. I can do this, can do rand 1 through 100. That will give me an array of 5 random numbers between 1 and 100. Okay, so let's see that. There is my list of random numbers. I can do that again if I want to, and get a new list of random numbers. Okay, is that good? Useful? Now, if I do this, I get the first number, 54. This is a method. This right here is this method right here. Did you know that? Well, no, you do. What? You don't see how this could be a method? Well, let me show you. It's like this. Dun, dun, dun. Now that's a method. And I think we can do that. Now, of course, like that. There we go. Doesn't that look a little strange? It does, but that's what's really going on when you do this. Okay? Now you know. That's, a lot of people don't know that, but now you know. So let me quickly review what I just explained. And this is another kind of method. It's the special, well, kind of special square brackets method, which is what you use for arrays. Right here it's demonstrated. We get the value, the first value, because index 0. And here's where I show you it's actually a method. But Ruby allows you to use it like this, so you don't have to type this, right? You see now how it is a method, which you can define like this. Okay? Any questions about that? By the way, if you're new here, thanks a lot for watching. My name is Jesus Castellar, Ruby developer from Spain, and I have a website called rubyguides.com. rubyguides.com. Okay? So let's quickly review. We just covered question mark methods. What's question mark methods? Well, we just covered that. It's query methods where we ask true or false, yes or no. It looks like that, right? And then we have the exclamation mark methods, which look like that, right? I mentioned that the exclamation mark methods are not necessarily actions, but they go together with a non-exclamation mark method. Okay? It's like a different version of the non-exclamation mark method. So don't have exclamation mark method if you're not going to have the counterpart, right? The opposite, we could say. We also cover methods with optional or default arguments right here. And finally, we cover unary methods, methods with or without arguments, and square brackets method like this. And I give you this trick to create an array of random numbers. Okay? As an exercise, try to use this, adapt this code to create an array of random characters. Can you come up with the solution to create an array of random characters? That's a little exercise for you. And you can base your solution on this, okay? Okay, so let me show you another strange method. We already covered this in another live stream, but I want to cover it again because it's very important. Here it is. I can put anything here, like the number 1. What I get is an array of that thing. Here is another. What if in here I put an array? Oops, sorry. I want to type this. Well, I get the array. Nothing changes. So what's this? What's this? Watch. If I have an array, get an array. If I don't have an array, I get an array. So what does that mean? It means that using this method, and yes, this is a method, it looks like a class, but it's actually a special method. I always get an array. So even with nil, you will think, oh, what happens? You want to ask this question, right? What happens if I use nil or I use something else? I still get an array. What if I pass in true or false? I still get an array. So as long as this is a valid object, in fact, we could do object.new. Object.new. I get an array. So you're guaranteed an array as long as this is a valid Ruby object. And the cool thing is, if you already have an array, it doesn't do anything with it. You get the array back. So this is a really cool trick, really cool method that you can use if you want to guarantee that whatever you have is going to be an array. Do you know when you can use this? Do you know the use case? Well, let's say we have a method that, for example, let's say something that works with arrays. It has to have an array to work. Let's say that it gets the last value of the array. So get last value, for example, this expects an array. If we do this and get the last value with -1, in JavaScript, I don't think you have -1, but this basically allows you to get the last value, right? And that's how you do that. Now, question for you. What happens if I take this code from get last value and I pass in a not array, something that's not an array? Well, first, what happens if I don't pass anything at all? Well, of course, I get an argument error, right? Which means we are missing the argument. Now, what happens if I give it something that's not an array? Let's say I give it a number, an integer. Can you guess? Well, another error. Or not, because it happens that but that's an expected value, right? It happens that from numbers you can get indexes. That's kind of strange how it works, but basically you're getting the bits, the individual bits that make up the number. Why? Because a number is made up of 8 bits, what's called a byte, right? So 1 byte, it's 8 bits. So when you do this, which we explained before, it's a method, you are basically getting the individual bits that make up the number. So that's why that worked, but it didn't get the last value because it doesn't make sense to get the last value of a number, right? Of an integer. Now what if I give it something else, something that doesn't implement the square brackets, like let's say object.new. Now we get nil, okay? So that's interesting. And also kind of not what we wanted. Now let's say that we change this, and instead of that we get we do array.empty first. What happens? Well, notice going to be a different thing. We get undefined method empty. So a lot of you beginner developers, also not so beginner, you see this error a lot. No method error, undefined method. No method error, undefined method. No method error, undefined method. Well, what is this error telling you? What is this error telling you? It's telling you that this object doesn't have this method. That's all this is, right? We're trying to call a method on an object that doesn't have that method. So if we pass in an array, works because arrays have empty, right? That works because arrays have empty. Object doesn't have empty. Integers don't have empty. So how can we use what you learn with this special kind of method to not get this error? Well, we could do this. We can do get last value and then array, and then we wrap whatever we get passed into an array, and then I can pass whatever I want. I will always get some kind of answer. You see? So there is that. And that's interesting because we need to do that. So that's how you can use that, this kind of method. Now, how is this method defined? Well, I believe it's defined like this. I think. Let's find out. Now, in fact, that broke my prices. Yeah, it threw me out completely off price. So that's interesting. But basically, this method is defined on the kernel module. So kernel. This is a module in Ruby which has many methods. Has methods like puts and others that you use every day as a Ruby developer. So here's where you have this array method defined. Okay? So any questions? I'm going to be reading the chat for any questions. We have Johnny Arley asking why return the first value the method has embodied. I'm not sure what you mean by that. The body of the method is this, right? It's what you have inside between the def definition and the end. That's the body of the method. This is the method name. This is the method arguments, method body, and this method start, method end, right? Method start, method end. That's the parts of the method. So I'm not sure what you mean when the method doesn't have a body. Well, I think we are done for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for your support. If you want to learn more, click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and visit my website rubyguides.com. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you in the next video.